It goes without saying that everyone had hoped there would not be another wave and another round of restrictions as we face yet another month of this pandemic. How can we confront COVID-19 fatigue? Let's find out as we're joined in Calgary, Alberta by David Dozois. He's a professor of psychology at Western University. And Professor, it's good to have you on our airwaves again. How are you doing tonight?
Thanks. Nice to be back. I'm doing well, thanks.
Good to hear. Let's start with this. What's a normal reaction to what we as a province are all experiencing right now?
Well, I think given the pandemic and unfortunately the next wave and the Omicron variant, I think people are experiencing, understandably, a lot of anxiety because we've been a bit on a roller coaster. We thought this was over. We thought we could see light at the end of the tunnel, and all of a sudden, I think we're starting to face yet more restrictions and lockdowns and an increase in cases. And so it's worrisome. And I think some people are at a point where they're just, fed up and feeling a bit demoralized by the fact that we're once again on the roller coaster with this.
Fed up and demoralized makes a lot of sense, but I'm wondering if there are more, that you can tell anyway, more long-term adverse effects that would be sort of, going years forward, much more problematic than the adjectives you have just used. What do you think?
Yes, well, I think the pandemic itself has created certainly a lot of anxiety and depression. And I've been involved. I'm on the board of directors for an organization called Mental Health Research Canada, and we've conducted polls across the country in both official languages. We've conducted now 9 polls, and we're continuing on. So we started this just when COVID-19 first hit, and what we found is that anxiety. For people who said anxiety was high or extremely high, about 5% of people said that, and that went up to about 20%. So from pre-COVID to when COVID started, and that level has maintained over the course of the different polls we've been conducting, regardless of whether restrictions are lifting or not lifting and that kind of thing. Depression went from about 4% to 10% at that time, and unfortunately that has been trending upward. And so I suspect not only will we have what some researchers call an echo pandemic of mental health issues, but we're going to experience a lot of anxiety and probably depression down the road, partly due to the pandemic itself, but I think also due to social isolation and other variables.
Just to put that into some kind of perspective, are those the kinds of increases you would traditionally see? And I don't know, you fill in the blank here, on 9/11 or in the event of a world war or, I don't know, someone goes through a divorce or a death in the family. You tell me.
Yes, that is true. I think there is an initial response to that, and certainly with other variants like SARS, when SARS hit a number of years ago, certainly there were mental health repercussions of that. And the good news is I think that society does tend to bounce back. And for the most part, I think Canadians are quite resilient. But nonetheless, there will be a pocket of individuals who are more vulnerable to anxiety and depression who will experience long-term effects of this.
Well, I wonder again if one of those long-term effects is some kind of adverse consequences to our memory banks. Does this affect the brain in such a way as to make people not be able to remember things they normally would?
That is a common experience, certainly. I think, last year when you asked people how they're feeling, I think most people said they're stressed or they're worried or they're lonely. And now you get more responses like, I feel burnt out, I feel exhausted, I feel depleted. And, I think those brain fog or memory issues is a common response when we have an increase in a cognitive load. So when our brains are full of information, and in part, they're full of information because of COVID-19, we're worried a lot more. And so our brains are processing so much more information than it normally would. We tend to, for some people, they may be ruminating or stewing about COVID and might I get it? Will my family member get it? Those kinds of things. And I think that creates almost an issue where we're having to constantly process a dual process. We're processing in the back of our minds all this worry, and then at the same time, we're trying to focus on our tasks at hand. And so certainly there is, memory difficulties, indecisiveness, concentration difficulties, and those kinds of things. And I think, anxiety and depression as well contribute to that. Those are common symptoms of anxiety and depression. Concentration difficulties, lack of motivation, low energy, feeling a bit more indecisive or more confused or more tired or burnt out.
The one thing I hear, perhaps more than any other, and I wonder if you do as well, is the complete, how would I describe this here? People's sense of time is lost. They just, they don't know what day it is anymore. They don't know what month it is. They don't know how long this thing has lasted. Has that been one of the consequences you've seen as well?
It has. In some ways, I think it's a bit like Groundhog Day. I think with lack of structure in our day, many of us were working from homes. Many of us still are working from home. And so, the days tend to blur into each other, and it becomes a bit, as I said, like Groundhog Day, and you kind of forget what day it is. I know my parents have a thing where they flip, the card each day to remind them what the next day is. And I know some news organizations have been kind of announcing it's, whatever day it is, and they remind viewers of what day it is because of that very thing. I think part of it's that we're lacking structure in our day, and we're lacking, the things the frameworks that usually remind us and keep us on tab in terms of where things are at.
Let me ask you about what I presume is a kind of a technical term in your line of work, and that is caution fatigue. What is that?
Yeah, caution fatigue is really, in many ways, I think, essentially where we get to a point where we're tired of restrictions and we sort of let our guard down. So when COVID first broke, I think what happened is many people were anxious, were very concerned about, will I get it? Will my family members get it? How long will this last? How contagious is it, and so on. And what happens when we experience anxiety like that is our bodies kick in this very adaptive process called the fight or flight response. And so our bodies are prepared with increased heart rate, more oxygen to our bloodstream, and so on, to prepare to fight or to get the heck out of there. And what happens when that alarm system gets triggered and activated for so long is eventually you get to a point where the body goes into a bit of exhaustion and you're tired of it. And so part of the issue in some ways is once we face our fears, our anxiety starts to go down. I practice cognitive behavioral therapy, and so this is a very effective form of psychological treatment for a number of different disorders. But for anxiety, for example, if I'm treating someone who has a fear of dogs or a fear of social anxiety, fear of public speaking, I would have them face their fears bit by bit and do what we call exposure so that they can change their thinking and so that they can habituate to what it is that they fear. The double-edged sword of COVID-19 is we've been facing this alarm system's been active for so long. We've been facing it for so long that we've sort of habituated to it, even though it's a bit dangerous to habituate to it. This is still an objective threat, and we need to be careful not to let our guard down. So caution fatigue is really letting our guard down. The World Health Organization talked about it as almost being, lacking in energy because of COVID-19. And so we're more apt to slip up and let our guard down, do things that are really, quite frankly, more dangerous.
Okay, so you've described the impact of that on an individual in our society. Now let's assume what you've just described multiplied by 15 million. Right? Let's assume that, or at least a big chunk of the people in the province of Ontario are experiencing this right now. Can you talk to us about what the societal-wide implications are for a huge, millions potentially, a huge number of people experiencing this all at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, it's very dangerous because when we need to balance anxiety. On one hand, I think sometimes people are a bit over vigilant about COVID-19 and it's causing a lot of anxiety and worry. And on the other side, I think sometimes people are more nonchalant about it and not taking it seriously enough. And I think the danger of that, of course, society-wide, is that there still is, the threat out there. COVID-19 is, you've seen the cases. They've been jumping really high of late. And the Omicron variant has really been spreading. And so the danger of caution fatigue is that we're letting our guard down. And what's happening is that it's more easy to have people be careless and therefore start spreading even more and creating new variants, essentially.
Now, obviously, not all 15 million Ontarians can go see a therapist if they think they're experiencing this. We simply don't have the capacity to handle that kind of workload. But
Right.
if people watching or listening to this right now think they are in that boat, what do you recommend?
Well, I think in some ways, I think there's three main things for caution fatigue that would be helpful. One is kind of keeping your thinking in check. Another is maintaining an attitude really of social responsibility. And then the third thing I think is to learn to better manage stress. So in terms of keeping your thinking in check, I think it's really important for us to be evidence-based in our thinking. It's very easy for us to think with our emotions or let our emotions drive what our behavior or what we're feeling rather than kind of sticking to the facts and thinking. So it's very easy to, for example, think the sky is falling, or as I mentioned before, it's very easy for some people to be nonchalant and think, well, I haven't experienced COVID yet. My chances are low. I'm not going to worry about it. But the problem with that is, of course, we're creating the very problem we're trying to avoid. And so I think part of the solution to caution fatigue is always being evidence-based in our thinking and making sure we're focusing on what we need to be doing, our provincial and local health regulations, washing our hands, maintaining distance, getting that third booster shot if you haven't already, or getting vaccinated if you haven't already. I think the evidence supports that, and we need to be evidence-based in our thinking. The other thing is to act beyond yourself. I think we often, it's so easy to think about your own needs. I've missed connecting with people. I've missed getting together with loved ones. I'm gonna risk it at this point or something. And it's so easy to do that. And I think it's really important to think beyond ourselves and recognize that we have a social responsibility. And we need to think in particular about people who are vulnerable or elderly, who are more at risk if they do catch COVID-19. And then the third thing is to really better manage stress. I think we're better able to adhere to restrictions and be compliant when we're feeling like we're on top of things and when we feel like we're able to manage stress. And I often view stress as almost like water in a jug. If the water level gets too high, it's very easy for a little hit on the jug for the water to just splash all over the place. And if we can do things to lower the water level in the jug, then it can take a hit and it can slosh around, but it won't spill everywhere. And those are things like eating well and maintaining good sleep patterns and keeping your thinking in check and making sure you're active and doing things that are rewarding and enjoyable.
That's a nice metaphor. Where do you think the water level is in the jug that is the province of Ontario right now?
I think it's pretty high. And I think it's pretty high both in terms of anxiety about COVID-19, but I think it's pretty high in terms of people feeling sort of demoralized and tired of restrictions, quite honestly. I think, we're social creatures and we want to connect with people. We're kind of wired to love and be loved and to connect. And so when that's missing because of restrictions, it wears thin, understandably. But I think part of it is recognizing there is light at the end of the tunnel and we're almost there. We just need to kind of keep pushing and do what's right so that we can reflatten the curve.
Just finally, in our last minute and a half here or so, and let me set this up by saying I don't mean this to sound like a snippy question, because I know people are dealing with a lot of very serious issues out there right now. Mm-hmm. But there are some among us who lived through World War II. The so-called greatest generation. And they may look at the kinds of things that people are, frustrated or complaining about today and say, we had bombs raining over us in London, for 40 straight days. And, some of you people are complaining because you've seen everything on Netflix already. You want to talk to us about perspective for a second?
Well, it's good. I remember reading once that, something, I think it was on Twitter, where someone wrote, people sacrificed their lives in World War I and II so that I can have my freedom. All we need to do is sit on the couch. All we need to do is adhere to some restrictions. It's not that difficult. So I think we do need to put things in perspective and recognize that this is very difficult. It's difficult worldwide, of course, and it's infringed on our freedom and our ability to have more control than we normally would. But at the same time, I think we need to recognize that it's, realistically, it's a pretty small sacrifice to make for the greater good, and so that we can put this behind us and then move on with our day-to-day lives and to the things we really enjoy and have loved.
Amen to that. Professor David Dozois, professor of psychology at Western University, which is in London. He's joined us from Calgary, Alberta. Professor Dozois, it's always great to have you on our program. Take good care, and we'll see you again down the road.
Thanks so much. Take care.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.